Today we're diving into an explosive collection of stories that are reshaping the Western world as we speak. From a massive scandal that's threatening to expose some of the most powerful people in America, to a jaw-dropping moment when artificial intelligence turned against its own creator, to shocking revelations about how your tax dollars are being spent at the border, we'll also look at a rare piece of good news for millions of Americans, a French industrial empire on the brink of collapse, and Germany's bold gamble to save its economy. And trust me, I've saved the most fascinating piece for the very end of this episode. I spent years working at one of those big-name media organizations, the kind you see on every screen. I watched editors kill stories that didn't fit the preferred narrative. I saw how facts got bent to serve agendas. Eventually, I couldn't do it anymore. I walked away from that comfortable paycheck and those impressive credentials because I realized something simple. The truth matters more than the brand on your business card. Now I'm here, independent, answering to no one but you and the facts. Before we dive deep into these stories, I need to ask you something. If you value what we're doing here, if you appreciate that we're spending hours fact-checking, verifying sources, making sure you're not getting fed manufactured narratives, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. And if you're in a position to sponsor our work, even a small contribution helps us keep doing this job right, avoiding the fake news trap that's swallowed so many others. It means the world to us. And please, watch until the very end, because what I've got waiting for you there will absolutely blow your mind. Let's start with a story that's got Washington in absolute chaos. The Epstein files are back, and they're bigger and more damaging than anyone expected. Over 23,000 pages of emails, personal journals, and financial records have just been released to the public, and the fallout is seismic. Among all those documents, there are communications where Jeffrey Epstein himself mentioned Donald Trump as someone who visited that infamous island. Now, Trump has come out swinging, demanding that every single page be published for what he calls establishing justice, and he's pointing fingers directly at Democrats, accusing them of manipulation. The House of Representatives is holding hearings right now. Trump is denying any involvement, saying he barely knew the guy, but the pressure is mounting from every direction. His opponents are calling for Bill Clinton to testify under oath, and there's a massive campaign building for complete transparency. What we're seeing here isn't just another political scandal. This could shake the foundations of power in both the White House and Hollywood. Think about the implications. We're talking about potential connections between some of the most influential people in America and one of the most disturbing criminal operations in recent history. But here's what really gets me. The timing of this release, the way it's being weaponized politically, the selective leaks before the full document dump. Someone wanted this to explode right now, at this specific moment. And the question we should all be asking is, who benefits? Because in Washington, nothing this big happens by accident. These files were sitting somewhere for years and suddenly they're everywhere. What changed? Who made that call? And if you think that's wild, wait until you hear what happened next in the tech world. This one is absolutely unprecedented, and it reveals something deeply strange about where we are with artificial intelligence. Elon Musk, the richest man on the planet, the guy who owns X, formerly known as Twitter, just got publicly called out by his own AI system. Yes, you heard that right. Grok, the artificial intelligence that Musk's company developed, has identified its own creator as one of the leading spreaders of false information in the United States. Grok didn't just make a vague accusation. The AI specifically pointed to Musk's posts about elections and various crises, citing multiple examples of manipulated information and misleading claims on X. This is mind-blowing for several reasons. First, we've never seen an AI system essentially rebel against its creator like this. Second, it raises massive questions about how these systems are programmed and whether they can truly operate independently. And third, Musk's response has been absolutely fascinating to watch. He immediately promised to update Grok, whatever that means, and he's been posting ironic tweets trying to laugh off the whole situation. But you can see the panic beneath the humor. Users on X are already joking about whether he'll just ban his own AI for telling the truth. The media is having a field day with this, and honestly, rightfully so, because what we're witnessing here is either a spectacular failure of oversight or the most honest AI ever created. Either way, it tells us something crucial about the relationship between tech billionaires and the truth. Think about the precedent this sets. If Musk's own technology is calling him out for spreading false information, what does that say about the platform he controls? What does it say about the hundreds of millions of people who get their news from X every single day? This isn't just a tech story. It's a story about power, accountability, and whether the systems we're building to inform us can actually be trusted when the people who own them have their own agendas. Now let's talk about what's happening at America's borders, because what's been revealed in these leaked documents is genuinely disturbing. Journalists have obtained internal reports from the Department of Homeland Security, and what they show is a radical reallocation of resources that nobody voted for and very few people knew about. Thousands of federal agents who were assigned to combat child trafficking and extremist activities have been quietly transferred to immigration enforcement duties. Let me give you the numbers, because they're shocking. Over the past 3 months, the time spent on operations targeting child exploitation has dropped by 1/3. Not because there's less trafficking happening, not because the problem got solved, but because the agents who were doing that work are now processing deportations. This information comes from more than 65 official interviews with people inside these agencies, and it paints a picture of priorities that should alarm every American regardless of where you stand on immigration. Here's the core question that nobody in power wants to answer. How do you justify taking agents away from stopping child trafficking to focus on deportation operations? I don't care what your political views are. Protecting children from exploitation should be non-negotiable. But apparently in the current calculation, mass deportation takes precedence over everything else. The documents also reveal layoffs, accusations of abuse of authority, and a complete breakdown in the agencies that are supposed to keep us safe. What really bothers me about this story is the lack of transparency. These weren't policy changes announced in press conferences. These weren't decisions debated in Congress. This was done quietly, internally, and we only know about it because of a leak. That should frighten everyone. Because if they're willing to hide this, what else are they hiding? What other trade-offs are being made behind closed doors in the name of national security? The debate in America right now is brutal. On one side, you have people saying border security is paramount and everything else is secondary. On the other side, you have people asking how you can claim to care about protecting Americans while you're defunding the units that protect American children from predators. Both sides are throwing around statistics. Both sides are accusing the other of extremism. But the facts in these documents don't lie. Resources were moved, priorities were changed, and vulnerable people are paying the price. Let me shift gears here to something that's actually good news for once, because I know this whole episode so far has been pretty dark. Millions of Americans just got a financial boost that's going to make a real difference in their lives. Social Security payments have increased by 2.5% starting this January, which means the average monthly check has jumped to $1,976. For families, that number goes up to $3,089 a month. But here's the really significant part. More than 3.2 million former government workers who were restricted under the old WEP and GPO rules are now going to receive additional payments, sometimes exceeding $1,000 per month. That's not a small adjustment. That's life-changing money for people who've been shortchanged for years because of bureaucratic formulas that never made sense. And in April, there's going to be another wave of increases, with the Social Security Administration promising recalculations that will include previously unpaid amounts. Both Republicans and Democrats are racing to take credit for this, which is always amusing to watch. Politicians love good news when they can attach their names to it. On social media, you're seeing retirees celebrating what some are calling a small social revolution. And honestly, in an era where we're constantly talking about economic anxiety and the squeeze on working people, seeing the government actually deliver more money into the pockets of seniors is refreshing. Now, I'm not naive. I know this raise is partly about adjusting for inflation, and I know it doesn't solve all the long-term problems with Social Security funding, but for the millions of people who rely on these checks to pay rent, buy medicine, and put food on the table, this matters. It's tangible. It's real. And in a political climate where good news feels rare, I think we should acknowledge it. Let's cross the Atlantic now, because Europe is dealing with its own crisis, and this one is hitting France particularly hard. NovAsco, formerly known as Ascometal, is a manufacturing group with 760 employees and 4 major facilities, and it's on the verge of total collapse. After a failed acquisition deal with the British investment fund Greybull Capital, the word bankruptcy is being used openly, and the situation is dire. The plant in Moselle, which employs 450 workers, has already been shut down. The French government has poured 75 million euros into trying to save this company, but the financial holes keep getting deeper. Officials are desperately searching for a new investor before the end of September, and if they don't find one, France is going to lose what many consider a symbol of its industrial heritage. What's playing out in France right now is a story we've seen repeated across Europe and America for decades. Traditional heavy industry struggling to compete, private equity firms promising salvation and then walking away, workers left holding the bag while executives escape with golden parachutes. The unions are furious. There are strikes, protests, workers blocking roads and demanding answers. And meanwhile, the politicians are making speeches about industrial policy while doing very little to actually save these jobs. Here's what frustrates me about situations like this. Everyone knew this company was in trouble. Everyone knew the acquisition was risky, but decisions got made anyway, probably with a lot of backroom handshakes and promises that were never meant to be kept. And now you've got hundreds of families facing unemployment, entire communities built around these factories wondering what comes next. The human cost of these failures is enormous, but it rarely factors into the spreadsheets. Germany, on the other hand, is taking a very different approach to its industrial challenges, and the scale of what they're doing is staggering. The German government has just announced that electricity for heavy industry will be subsidized down to 5 euro cents per kilowatt hour until 2028. To make this happen, they're allocating 10 billion euros in direct subsidies and 500 billion euros in infrastructure investment. This is Germany's answer to competition from China and the broader European economic crisis. They're essentially saying, we're going to make it so cheap to manufacture here that our industries can compete with anyone. Economists are predicting a boom. Industrial leaders are applauding. The Minister of Economy is talking about accelerating the country's green transition while simultaneously keeping factories running at full capacity. But of course, there's controversy. Critics are calling this a market distortion that will harm competition and undermine climate goals. Labor unions are asking why these massive subsidies are only going to big corporations and not being spread to ordinary citizens who are also struggling with energy costs. It's a fair question. Why should a steel plant get electricity at 5 cents per kilowatt hour while families are paying 10 times that amount? The rest of Europe is watching Germany with a mixture of anxiety and envy. Anxiety because if Germany succeeds with this industrial policy, it's going to pull even further ahead of countries like France and Italy that are still stuck in bureaucratic paralysis. Envy because, well, who wouldn't want their government to invest €500 billion in keeping their economy competitive? The European Union is going to have to grapple with whether this kind of national industrial policy is compatible with the single market rules everyone supposedly agreed to follow. Here's the bigger picture that ties all these stories together. We're living through a moment of massive institutional stress. In America, you've got scandals threatening to expose the elite, technology turning against its creators, agencies abandoning their core missions, and a government trying to buy goodwill with increased benefits while the foundation cracks. In Europe, you've got industrial collapse in France and industrial intervention in Germany, two completely opposite approaches to the same underlying problem. How do you maintain a modern economy when the old rules don't work anymore? The Epstein files, the Grok situation, the DHS documents, they all point to the same thing, a loss of trust in institutions, in leadership, in the systems that are supposed to protect us and inform us. When an AI calls out its own creator for spreading lies, when federal agents are pulled away from stopping child trafficking to chase deportation quotas, when thousands of pages of evidence about powerful people's connections to criminal activity get dumped into the public sphere, what we're seeing is not just individual scandals, we're seeing the breakdown of the consensus that held things together. And in Europe, the industrial struggles of France and Germany show that even the wealthiest nations are desperately trying to figure out how to adapt to a world where China can manufacture cheaper, where energy costs are unpredictable, where the social contract between governments and citizens is fraying. Germany's trying to spend its way to stability. France is watching its industrial base crumble. Neither approach is guaranteed to work, and both carry enormous risks. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in a world where every day brings new shocks, new revelations, new crises that demand our attention. The pace of change is accelerating, and the old certainties are gone. The powerful are being exposed. The systems we built are revealing their flaws, and ordinary people are caught in the middle, trying to make sense of it all. That's why what we do here matters. That's why independent journalism, fact-checking, refusing to accept the official narrative without question, all of that is more important now than it's ever been. The mainstream outlets, the ones I used to work for, they're still playing the old game. They're still protecting their access, their advertisers, their relationships with power. We don't have those constraints. We can tell you what's actually happening, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it doesn't fit a neat political narrative. So let me summarize what we've covered today, because these are the stories you need to remember. The Epstein files are back and threatening to expose connections between powerful figures and criminal activity. Elon Musk's own AI called him out as a top spreader of false information, raising questions about truth and technology. Internal DHS documents revealed that child trafficking units were defunded to prioritize deportations. Social Security recipients got a meaningful increase in benefits that will help millions of families. France's NovAsco is on the brink of collapse, symbolizing Europe's industrial crisis, and Germany is gambling €500 billion on subsidizing its heavy industry to compete with China. Each of these stories matters on its own, but together they paint a picture of a Western world in transition, struggling with accountability, technology, security, and economic survival. These aren't just news items to scroll past. These are the forces shaping your future, your economy, your security, and your information environment. If you found value in this episode, if you learned something or saw these stories in a new light, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with people who need to hear it. And if you're able, consider sponsoring our work. We don't have corporate backers. We don't have billionaires funding us. We have you, and that's exactly how we want it, because it means we answer to you and the truth, nothing else. Your support lets us keep doing this, keeps us independent, keeps us honest. Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, and never stop questioning what you're told.